Good evening to all our viewers. Hope everyone is doing fine during these dire straits. I'm Parth Dave, the Secretary of Technical Committee of this year, and I welcome you to the first edition of Tech Tippani. This time I'm joined by Romin Irani, who is a developer advocate at Google with a work experience of 26 years and an expertise in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cloud computing. How are you doing this evening, Romin, sir?
Doing fine. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for having me on this program.
So let's start this interview with the first question that comes to my mind. So what does it exactly mean to be a developer advocate?
Okay, so the way I would look at developer advocacy is that, let's say you're doing developer advocacy for a company and services. Now, your job is to see and meet different users. Could be organizations, could be individual developers, could be anyone.
Right.
They might be at different stages in the way they are, working with your products. One is maybe they're not know nothing about your product; they want to just learn about it. Second is those who are sort of familiar with it, but they want to try out the products. They want to build out a demo. The third segment of users could be those who sort of evaluate products, and they're now specifically looking for help to build a particular solution, or they are facing. So as a developer advocate, you kind of straddle all these three spectrum or range of users, whether they are just wanting to learn, whether they are looking to evaluate your products, or whether they're looking for a specific solution. But the big difference between, doing developer advocacy, or I would say one key point to remember while doing developer advocacy is you do not try to sell the product. You do not be a seller to them. You don't try to make a sale. Your job is to be a trusted advisor to those individuals or companies and just be with them through the technical. At the end up telling them that, look, your product, my product is not a good fit for what you want to do. And that's a perfectly fine outcome too. So, that's how you really build that trust and relationship. But no selling the product, just let them know about what your product can do, how they can use, and most importantly, how can you make them successful?
Right. No, fair enough. So from what I've heard is you were previously a senior engineer at Google.
I was a partner engineer at Google.
Partner engineer, right.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
So partner engineer's role is something sometimes we hear about a customer. But a partner engineer's role is that there are various companies in India who have teams that work on Google. So they execute projects for their customers, but using Google Cloud products, for example. So my role is to work with those partners and make sure that their teams are capable of executing the projects on Google Cloud. And if they're working on certain projects, I can help to review the architectures. I can help to resolve any issues that you want, not always individually. Sure that these partners, or in other words, these companies, are successful on Google Cloud Platform. Yeah, but again, this is more under like a sales. So they're working only on real opportunities and not really just from a knowledge perspective. Now my role is a lot more on the fact that I just end up talking about our products. I don't try to sell.
Right. So you are someone who graduated in the 90s, in the mid 90s, I believe. So what do you think is the most different now than before? So there's obviously been a lot of change in the IT industry. So what is something which has stood out to you at least?
Well, I think it's too broad a question in terms of what's kind of changed or what's kind of stood out. Obviously, nothing has. Obviously, many of the whatever things that one has learned or applications that one written, products that one has delivered, they don't exist anymore. They got either obsoleted, they got rewritten, they got thrown away, whatever be the reason. But I mean, in short, the way I look at it is that you want to take an engineering throughout your career, you'll have to be hands-on, which also means that you'll have to keep learning, unlearning. That sort of stuff goes on. The day you stop doing that, probably you'll hit a plateau in some way or the other. So the idea is things will change. Sometimes when you look back, you kind of have a smile on your face that what kind of programs you are writing once upon a time, what kind of languages, capabilities, but everything changes for the better. But if you are in the software industry and if you are a developer, um, the the saying goes that it's never been a better time to be a developer. That
Definitely.
remains a constant.
So now I wanted to ask one question. So this again, I mentioned that you graduated in the mid 90s. What was the interview process like during those times?
Well, I can only speak on terms of what I
Right.
there was similar. Usually the patterns were same. So what this was directly out of placement even in that time.
No, because
And
now, oh, sorry, go on. Sorry
yeah,
for
yeah,
cutting you off.
please. Yeah, so I'll just maybe put and then you can ask me some other qualifying questions. So basically, the companies come to our colleges, we show an interest in them. They have some sort of an aptitude test, a little bit of a written test where they'll just check your cognitive ability. And once that's how they filter us. And then once you kind of probably 50, 100 of us are sitting for that test and it's whittled down to maybe 10, 15 of us. And then those 10 or 15 people are taking through a personal interview. So we used to have those folks come over to the college and then we do 3 rounds of interview, a little bit of technical stuff, a little bit of general, the way you are approaching things, and they make a decision based on that. Many others at times had applied for open positions that were there. Obviously, things have changed. If you ask me how people used to apply before, how they apply now, how they should ideally be positioning themselves now, it's a very big difference now. But I think it's all about just appearing for a few tests, could be written ones. But those are different times. I mean, I probably there are some situations now that even companies do it in that similar way. But I have my own thoughts on how one should do it into this.
Right. So speaking of interviews, what was your interview process like?
My interview
How was your
process,
experience?
I mean, I've been through a few interviews. You want to know the first one or the last one?
Tell me about all of them actually.
Okay. So the first one, so this goes back near 25 plus years back.
Right.
Just give a written paper, which is more about an aptitude kind of a thing, whether I could do a few mathematical calculations or just some computational ability sort of thing. Once that got through, obviously there were a few just technical rounds of interviews, a few things around algorithms, things around in those days how PCs were, was a big thing. Yeah, something of that sort. Nothing much over there. But then, as it moved along, if I have to, come to the more recent times, the job in Google at least had about 6 interviews to give,
Ooh.
and that involved multiple areas again. So of course, the core thing there's a phone interview kind of a screen, which just checks on a few basic things, whether you're just alive at times and whether you know a few basic things. Once you get through that phone thing, and of course your resume supports what the role is about, then it goes to multiple levels. So there is a cognitive ability, just how we think, how you approach situations, not necessarily technical ones. Then there is a role-related interviews, which is more around whatever be the technical thing you're applying for. It's a deep dive into it. Could be a coding round, could be actually a system design, your whole architecture, how you would define X or Y, Z. So, yeah, at scale, things of that nature. And then, of course, there are a few other things depending upon the kind of, so if it's a leadership role, then be some leadership kind of input.
Right.
A general, behavioral kind of interview. So there to see how you approach certain situations. So they look at it from all angles. But key would be that if it's a technical role, there would be a few deep technical, couple of rounds at least of interview, which you'll need to sort of clear or convince whoever is taking it.
Right. So one question I wanted to ask you, it's kind of a personal question, you could say. Do you still program like on the side, like something like lead code, something like hacker rank or code chef?
So I don't do competitive kind of programming.
Right.
I mean, but at the same time, am I hands-on? The answer is an absolute yes. And there are multiple reasons for it. Even at my age, if I'm going to talk about my products, if I'm going to show demos for my products, if I'm going to build demos for my products, and most importantly, I need to come out as credible, as possible when I talk about my topic. So that's just my approach. The certain roles like mine also require that kind of ability because,
Hmm.
as I told you, this is not a selling role where I get away just your
Right.
10,000 feet. There is a need for all kinds of presentations. So obviously, your first conversation, you're talking at a high level, telling them what the things are. Once you maybe cross that stage, obviously the next thing they're going to ask you is show those demos to us or work with our teams. Can you work with our teams to build something? So obviously at some time your technical capabilities, abilities will come into play. So the simple answer to your question, Emma, yes, I am hands-on. Do I need to be hands-on? Absolutely. And and even if my job did require me to be that much of a hands-on person, it's just the way I've approached. I'm not comfortable talking about technology to others. So that's the benchmark I've set for myself. If I talk about a tech, I better have built something. It would be simple. Of course, I cannot build, the greatest thing that's out there. But yes, you have to be hands-on. Otherwise, you'll soon find your list of excuses going up when you're. But again, to be fair enough to everyone, your role needs to, require that. There are different roles people have to play. Not necessarily everyone needs to be hands. But
Right.
if I have to give any advice to people who are starting out or have, taken the journey, please be hands-on. There is no other substitute for that.
Right. So now coming to the question of Google. So I'm assuming you must have had opportunities where you are interviewing candidates.
Yeah.
So when it comes to interviewing candidates, what is something which you look for in a candidate when you're interviewing them?
So multiple things. So again, let's put it this way: in no order of preference, right. So it's not like what I'm saying first is or otherwise. So I'll just speak about a few things. I don't have a laundry list of it, but generally, the way we look at it is that if you don't know something, please tell us that you don't know.
Hmm.
It's absolutely fine not to know. That's just the general advice out there. So what this helps is that you don't end up creating some fictional kind of an answer to the question. That's going
Right.
to do more damage than anything else.
Correct.
Because at a certain number of experience that you have, right, these things matter. If you start saying anything up here, I mean, it's going to come out as a really red flag, in the way you kind of questions. Second is that whenever you create, let's say a question is put to you, right? At times the questions are ambiguous. At times the questions are a little too broad. There is no right, there is no wrong answer to it.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
But the way you approach these questions is state your assumptions clear. That
Correct.
okay, repeat the questions. Tell them this is what I understood. Is this what you want to know? And here are my assumptions. And then sort of slowly start framing out your answer. So we are also looking at candidates in the way they are approaching, how they are breaking it down, how they state their assumptions, and how they work. See, whenever an interview happens, please keep in mind that we'll miss out. There's a lot of preparation we know candidates are one, right? We also know that there's a lot of preparation as well as time that we are also spending to make sure that we get the right people that come. So it's in everyone's interest, and this is what people miss out. It's in everyone's interest to make sure that time is utilized and that there is a successful outcome. You
Right.
haven't made it to the stage by just applying your resume, you obviously got to the probably 1-2% of candidates who have been filtered and you're at this stage. So what we're looking for is that it has to be a discussion like scenario where you work out the solution, you ask a few qualifying questions, state your so on and so forth. And the other thing which is important is do not speak generally, right? That saying, I did this project and everyone was very happy, or
Hmm.
this project was very successful. Please throw those words out of any kind of a standard interview. What we are looking for is great. We are so happy that this project was successful. We know that. But can you quantify what you mean by success? What was success, in that particular situation? So what you want to do actually is support it with metrics, support it with data. So if you say that the system was maybe down for an hour, but after we did something, probably the number of times it's down is literally zero. Or the response time, people used to wait, for example, 10 seconds.
Hmm.
So support it with metrics. Or because of these new features, it really drove up subscriptions. How
Right.
much? Things of that nature. So anything that you do, right, you have to define what was success or what was the outcome
Right.
in metrics. If you're not talking metrics, it's anyone's guess what you are doing those projects. So there's a famous saying, right, by one of the that either show me the data or go with my opinion.
Hmm.
So it's something of that sort.
Right.
In short, the way I would put it is, don't speak general terms. Support it with metrics, and be very specific with examples. For example, when you're, it doesn't matter how experienced you are. Even if it's you're a year or two into your career, you have done something. Let's talk about it.
Right.
Be
Right. Right.
specific.
Definitely.
Uh, Give specific examples from your projects. That this is the situation. This was before. This was after. This is how we'll measure. So there are certain, I would say, frameworks available in the way you sort of explain what you did, why you did it, how you did it, what were the outcomes, things of that nature. So every project that you do in your career, make simple notes that actually put down
Hmm.
what were the metrics, what was success looking like, what were the issues faced, what are the things that you or you failed on. It's perfectly, but give very specific examples. It's just going to be a no in most of it. And this becomes more important as you go. You spend 10 years, 15 years working on something, specifically remember what the metrics were or just was a good outcome. No, that's going to look really bad in the interview process. So, and of course, I'm not going to, it's quite a no-brainer that you have to know technically what you're doing and you're applying for the job. So that specific interview as
Right.
to what you have to do. But while explaining any of these things, be upfront in your assumptions. Secondly, do not be afraid to say, this is not something I know about, or this never came up while I was doing my project. It's perfectly fine to know that. Nobody anywhere in the world anywhere knows it. And anyone who
Definitely.
claims that also, is a big fat liar. So there's nothing to feel bad for. It's
Right.
absolutely okay to say, you don't know, don't know.
So basically, you're saying that every candidate that comes to and is interviewing for a company, they should prefer to use quantitative and like using numbers and not something like just simple meaningless adjectives, basically.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that, you have to specifically like be, every time about numbers itself. There are certain things which can be qualitative,
Right.
but it needs to be supported at some point in time with numbers.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I don't know if it's a real business.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, so by numbers doesn't need to be dollar.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely,
It
definitely.
could be other kinds of metrics.
Number of users.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So now, basically, one question I wanted to ask is, we've heard that Google believes in creating like a very friendly and fun environment for everyone. And I've heard that you guys have some sorts of like games and arcade games set up at the workplace. So do you miss them when you're working from home now?
Well, it depends on the different campuses that are there in Google. Not
Right.
not every campus has all the fun stuff that you've probably been reading. Um, the only thing that I've seen common is free food. It's not free as in food, but
Right.
lots of food. But yeah, definitely you miss a few things. I think more importantly, it's just what you miss the most probably is sometimes certain kinds of discussions.
Hmm.
But again, it depends on the individual kind of certain roles are individual contributor roles or IC roles as we call it. Again, people have different interests, personalities. So uh, what each one is missing, I cannot speak for them, but it depends. I mean, I like to work from home also. So or more work from home. I like that. So there are certain things that I absolutely don't do.
Right. So one thing I read somewhere was that Google hires people who can code but don't necessarily have a technical degree. So there's a very popular YouTuber actually who's a huge advocate for comparative programming. His name is Clement Mihailscu, I think. Might have butchered the name, but I think that's what his name is. And he is someone who is an ex-Google employee, and he is someone who had a music degree and a math degree. So he majored in math, but he had a minor in music. So he's someone who does not have a technical degree, but he has a math degree, and he just learned coding within 2-3 months, and then he applied to Google and he got it. So is that true? That how much of that is true? That you don't really need to have a coding degree?
Well, it all depends on the role. I don't think we are stuck up on the fact that we need to have a certain kind of degree, because having a degree probably does not correlate to performing on the job. There could be many other factors that make a person successful or be able to do the job. So having a degree, this is not to discount the fact that you don't need a degree. Obviously, you have a degree, you've done certain things, maybe gone deeper into it, that has tremendous value also. But I don't think not just Google. I mean, generally the trend now is that it's all about more and more about skills that you bring to the table. More and more in terms of if you want to be interview, and if the hiring teams just want to take a bet and feel that you could be doing the job. I think the decision really lies at that point. Degrees are important. They play a role, but they are not the only criteria. I think if I have to just kindly switch the situation a bit, I would say you have to bring certain skills that the company that's hiring you is seeing very specific.
Hmm.
And again, the point keep in mind is that if you look at product management in general, right, or just the way products are built, there is a whole trend towards also the fact that on your team, you need to have people who've got the kind of diversity and in
Hmm.
terms of having different backgrounds, different skills, because the way a person with a certain background, A, looks at a product, uses the product, the background B, the way they kind of interpret is very different. So you need those kind of thoughts, views, user experience. It plays a big role over there. So I think the way I would look at it, it's a very strategic. Hey, they don't have a degree in X or Y, but Z.
Hmm.
There is some logic to it. There is a need for teams to be diverse while building a product, and those things are important. So, for example, if you say I'm going to build, software for the music industry, sure, we'll
Hmm.
need some coders, but you can almost imagine what are the other kind of things you'll also need to build a successful product for the music industry. You will need people from that industry, necessarily don't have a background, and this has always been the case. I mean, there are folks who call themselves domain experts, those are
Hmm.
those names people bring up, but you need them at times to bring in a different flavor to what you're building.
Right. Right.
And technical folks would not have the kind of domain. I mean, if someone tells me that, can I go ahead and build some product manufacturing free? My answer is, I don't know a hell about the manufacturing. Not that I don't know anything about it, but I just don't know enough to build a product that the manufacturer.
Correct.
Or am I spending all my time thinking what are the gaps or missing pieces in the manufacturing industry today? The answer is a big no. That's not my area.
Hmm.
But if someone comes with the idea, comes with the whole specification, sure, I could have to do it. It's just uh, that's a team, right? Which has different roles. People bring in sometimes the knowledge in that area, and I mean, generally, the thing is that most product managers will just be handling the product development, what features, when to build what. They don't necessarily be the ones who are actually.
Right, sir. So as you mentioned earlier, that for a candidate to be hired at Google, what's required is for them to be hands-on. So is there some other advice you'd like to give to the future candidates?
No, I wouldn't make a general comment that's saying that to hire at Google, you will have to be hands-on. Again, as I said, it depends on
Right.
the kind of roles. There are roles of all kinds, right? I mean, there's engineering, sales,
Hmm.
there's marketing, there's even internal applications, HR. But if you look at this engineering role,
Right.
yes, there is a focus on solving engineering problems. Or, for example, let's at least hear one language that you're comfortable. What is your favorite one? One language in which there is some kind of a foundation in computer science perspective, whether it's algorithms, data structures, so on and so forth. I don't
Hmm.
think we're going to tell you come sit down and write some sort every day and then go back home at the end of. No, I mean there are
Right.
folks within computer science research also putting that, but not necessarily that all of them. But see, the thing is, if anyone has a better way of evaluating candidates, probably those are the things also that are looking at. But yes, I wouldn't put it that every job at Google requires you to be. Because if it's engineering, if you're right out of college, the expectation is that you have a programming language you're comfortable with. And my suggestion would be pick that language. We don't care if it is Python. I mean, not we, anyone doesn't care. Whether
Hmm.
it's these are tools, right? I mean, you can be opinionated, be passionate about a language. It's good to have those things also. But go with a language that you're comfortable with. Go a little deeper. Be comfortable when it comes to data structures algorithms. And yeah, I mean, there are these competitive coding sites also. Take a
Right.
look at them, but don't let yourself be defined really by those rankings. I mean, the point is, let's put it this way, right? That if you want to get into any company of this nature, right? I mean, for that matter, just don't take these big brands. It can be any. Good work is going on everywhere. It's not necessarily the big brand company. Now, if you're not going to be showing certain outputs on your own, and I'll come to that in a minute,
Hmm.
then the only way, just assume you're running and you want to hire folks, right? How are you going to hire? Is the question I want to put back to your own. If you are running these companies and the applicants are straight out of college,
Hmm.
you have limited ways to evaluate. We all know what the standard courses are about, what they teach, and what the reality is in the industry. That gap has always been there. It's nothing or previously. That gap remains because it takes time for academia time to catch up with the practical things going on, so on and so forth. But if you're just coming out of college, I don't have much option than maybe looking at some of these ranking sites to see are you into it, right, or not. I'll still subject you to my problems and see how well you solve it. But the way I would suggest to most, you know, folks who are currently in college, even otherwise, right, is never ever. I mean, this is again my advice. I to each one to inter, but even for it out, that's fine. Never ever apply for a job. Let the job come. That's where
Okay.
you'll find the most interesting job. People are awake. People are looking at what you're doing. They're always looking for candidates who are passionate about it. And how can you make that happen? There are multiple things. As you're learning, right? Maybe have a blog, write about it, go deeper into it. Maybe have some projects on GitHub or anywhere else that you want. Start answering questions of folks on Stack Overflow, which is just copying things that and other
Right.
sites. So there are various ways by which you can activate. Sometimes you might be comfortable creating videos. You might be comfortable creating tutorials. Maybe you create a course, or maybe you just say, look, my work is, I like to answer questions. I'm that kind of a person. So maybe do that. But you have all these avenues to show what you're capable.
Hmm.
And trust me, people are looking. That's how the job will come to you. If you apply, you folks are all fortunate folks to be able to sit here, do your courses at your own convenience, and with a little bit of hard work and effort, you get the jobs. I don't see a problem. There is anyways a demand for, even if it is non-IT industry, demand any, because everything is digital in any case. So I don't see any way by which you will not get a job unless you're just saying, I don't want to even. So for some people, it will be a small, you'll get through in a week or two. For some people, maybe a month, maybe a two, whatever it is. Get right. But then is that what you want? Or is that, or do you want to stay in an area that you're right about it? And trust me, people are looking, they will put forward some things to you and say, are you interested? And then you look at it because they'll come to.
Right. So one question again. So basically, what I've noticed is in the quality of candidates. So students who have graduated in India from Indian universities and the students who have graduated from American universities, even if they're Indian or whatever nationality they are, there's quite a contrast between the two. Why do you think that is?
Wouldn't probably still make a general statement in terms
Right,
of,
definitely.
yeah. But
But the average student.
well, see, let's put it this way. Things have improved a lot, but at the same time, there's a lot of improvement that still could be done. The way it, I think, it can be defined in my book would be that it requires two to three things really to happen on a more active or involved basis. One is that the companies need to take a lot more, interest in some of these institutions. So these are partnerships that those colleges could do with specific companies and see if there are certain tools or products that they can introduce little earlier in the course so that you're. That's one. Second thing is there is a certain level that you expect teachers in organizations. So again, it's not to discount the effort that currently.
Yeah.
But it's important that they are also aware with their role. Because the point, remember, is that the role of a teacher or a professor. Yes, everyone thinks it's about I come to the class, I teach you, and here, and that's the end. I don't think that should be the goal. They need to inspire the students.
Right.
They need to guide them, and for that, that's only going to happen if they are credible to actually show you the things, to take you along the path. So that's where I believe that it cannot be a job. It needs to be, a lot more about just being so passionate and deep into that stuff. So I'm not saying there are no teachers in our institutions that do that, but there is a big gap there that I see typically with certain practitioners, certain professors that are outside. Um, the other thing, which is when we are talking about a gap, right? It's just a culture of taking risks, culture of saying that I just don't want a job. We have start something of my own. We are seeing those movements now in the startup community ecosystem coming out. So, and then of course, after that, it's just going to be an individual thing. So I believe that two things, right? It's partnership with existing organizations or large companies that have some very relevant products. Teachers need to be more of an inspiration giving teachers. And third, again, is going to be about sometimes the relevance of the syllabus, the books
Right.
that we are using. Certain subjects, there's always like when I look at it even now, I'm not shocked. I'm just irritated that those subjects still exist. Uh, those books still exist, and the point is, I feel they can be substituted. I don't want even your engineering or anything to be very one. And when I said 6 subjects on computer science, I don't mean that way, but there is a way it can move at a more pace. It can provide more electives. I think those things are clearly where it's almost like, if there are folks who want to try out new things, they're pretty much left on their own versus a variety of subjects and collaborate a little better. So, there are multiple reasons things are changing. All of this requires, years of effort, requires a lot of funding, requires equally you're seeing that, I mean, most of you are graduating at a time where there is the whole startup movement, startup
Hmm.
ecosystems. There are now funds available for individuals who have ideas. These things were very less. Things are even opened up. So the whole digitization, availability of materials, tutorials, I think you'll see the gap reducing more and more
Right.
at a very rapid pace. So while some of that argument still stands in terms of quality of students, quality of teachers, this infrastructure support that's out there in some of these colleges, it will change. Uh, but let's see.
Right.
Probably you folks can do that change.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
So, one question I wanted to ask you: what is your favorite language to program in?
I don't have any favorite languages.
You must have some preference, right? Definitely.
Well, my preference is what I call a bias, which is
Right.
I use what I know, right? So
You use what? I'm sorry.
I'll say my favorite language is the one that I know, so that I don't look like an idiot to others, something like that. But no, there is no favorite language because as you grow old, you'll figure out you wasted so much of your time on arguing with folks what your favorite language is, or frameworks, or operating system, or whatever it is, right? I mean, we all go through it. But at this stage, I don't. I really look at it as just a tool. But I'll tell you one thing. Since you're talking about programming language, my advice to anyone is every few years, look at one language that is new or which you've never tried out
Hmm.
and just give it a shot. Because the folks that are designing programming language are among the smartest people out there in the industry. The way they have thought about syntax, which is sometimes intuitive to use, you'll see some languages you get absolutely horrified just looking at the syntax. But certain languages you find it's almost reading like a language, right? It's intuitive. You kind of get it out. So you just have to imagine the kind of, and when you start looking at language taxes, different features, abilities, or what took you 500 lines to do, but now it's a few elegant lines. I don't mean just calling function someone, I don't mean that way, but just spend your time every few years. You will find that it really broadens how, just people are thinking. You really start getting inside the head as to what even made them come up with syntaxes for all these kind of things. But if you look at the programming language that I also programmed over, of course, it started with C and C++. Then I spent quite a while of my time in Java.
Hmm.
And of late, I've been doing a lot of Golang. But then again, it keeps shifting. So, and now actually my role is also of a type that, or it's been from a while that I can't someone next. There are clearly about half a dozen languages that are mainstream. So it doesn't matter right now for most of you, whether it's Java, whether it's Python, whether it's Node.js or JavaScript, or even C Sharp, Golang, and maybe another few, or in a few. You will have to probably be flexible enough. You need to have some ability to at least build in most languages. So I don't think I can even give a clear answer what my favorite language. I found all languages to have certain features which no other language. So from that angle, I think it's even that why are folks liking certain kinds of. There are clear reasons for it. Try to understand that. But if I could just give one simple tip, every 2 3 years, if you're as a working professional, just go through a programming language. You'll be surprised at the fact that you learned a particular language. You think of it would be written in a much more enjoyable way. See, after a while, remember as you start, there will be a plateau where you get the same thing again and again. I'm approaching everything in a similar manner. Also, just you get sort of like tired of every time I'm doing the same way, I'm doing the same way. So just having another language can open up other opportunities.
Right.
So keep that point
So,
in mind.
so you mentioned that every 3 or so years, a person should just look around in the market and see what language is being used or is on the come up. So would you say, so now with the recent influx of all like Bitcoin investors and with crypto mining, cryptocurrency taking off the way it has, would you say there is scope for people to learn something like Solidity? Solidity, for our viewers especially, Solidity is basically a programming language that has recently come out, and it is something which you can use to program on the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum, as you guys might know, ETH, it is one very famous cryptocurrency, and that thing operates on the Ethereum blockchain. So what do you think about that? Like, would you say it is something which is worth meddling with?
So first up, my 3 years is just a month. It could be ending.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And secondly, it need not be something that's brand new. It could be something that's quite solid. So if you go to, for example, there are 2 or 3 well-published research material that comes out every 6 months, which tell you what is the popularity of languages. And the popularity is based pretty much on open source projects, number of projects, for example, on GitHub, which are most active. So you could pick up from any of the top languages. Now, speaking of the languages that you're talking, these I would probably classify as very domain specific or very.
It's a niche. It's quite a niche.
Yeah. So it's got a clear focus, and if you have the interest, go for it. Remember, these languages will make you, in that particular sphere because they've already figured out what are the common things. Then they're given a construct or what is called as a domain specific language. Now, I'm no one to say whether that's something that should be looked at, not looked at. I mean, there are probably hundreds of such things out there. I firmly believe in. If that's what interests you, go for it. I mean, I don't have any other specific advice. Going to be clicking in the future or something like that. If that was the case, I would be an astronaut.
Right. Never hurts to know more, so I guess it's not bad.
Yeah.
So right. So back to the interview part. So let's say I were to be interviewing for, let's say, a Google or some other company, and they asked me a technical question which I didn't know the answer to. How would you suggest I should tackle the situation where I don't know the answer to a question they asked?
So let's put it this way. One is to just say that you don't know.
Right.
Right. But before you get to that point, see if there are ways by which you can meet them somewhere. In a sense that, see, let's okay, let me step back a bit if I get to usually, right? And when I mean usually, that's how it should be. And that's at least my experience when I've taken the job in, is that we don't want to trick the candidates in. We don't want to end up being in a situation where we are showing off our knowledge and intentionally asking questions that the candidates don't. That is absolutely not the intent of any interview at any sense. So you would usually find that you have been by the recruiter that in order for this interview to be successful, and mind you, I earlier told that the very fact that you get to the interview means that you have been filtered, you have thought that itself is an achievement of its own, to be honest. Just looking at the number of resumes or applications these companies get for. So if you are there at that stage, there have been enough things that the recruiters kind of explain to you. The interviews are going to be up, which areas they're going to be asking questions. And they will also share with you certain material on the web that is a good reference for the read up, practice, so on and so forth. We also tell the candidates how much time should we take there. So we also give that lead time. Another week, whatever it is, it needs to be something reasonable. So it's not that you're going to be completely surprised that They just ask me thought that I don't think that's going to happen most of
Right.
the time.
Right.
And it's not going to even happen. The individuals who are taking the interview are going to just start with some random thing to, just completely put you off track. If that happens, my strong advice is that company is not forward.
Right.
So having said that, right, the thing is not that it will just be an out of this world question. I don't think you have questions. If I have a mountain in this area, how can you explain to me how I can move Mount Fuji to some other
Right.
place
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something? I mean, that's let's keep all of that aside. It doesn't typically. But so the way I would approach it is probably you've got some sense of what the question is about. Please ask as many questions. Ask some qualifying questions. Say if your assumptions are maybe at times a step-by-step path towards the solution. So you can start with something. Say, am I on the right track? Am I getting misled? You can ask for hints. You can ask for any kind of direction of that nature also. So I would say that make sure you're and take your time. Let me just think out something instead of just jumping at even an answer or saying that
Right.
you
Right.
don't
Right.
know. And I can assure you that most interviewers, we are trained actually how to take it. Trust me, we've not got to this stage by just saying that I think I like to take interviews. So please, it doesn't work.
There's a training process you go through before even being the interviewer.
Yeah, in terms of how you typically conduct, what notes you make, how you can guide the candidates, how of course you can be courteous, how it's absolutely not allowed to trick the candidate into anything. So I would
It's
say
not. It's not what?
you're not
Sorry.
allowed to ask
Trick the
trick
candidate.
questions.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
nothing of that. Well, it's absolutely against the policy. I'm just telling you in straight black and white. It doesn't work. So the thing is, no need to overthink the situation. I think the chances are you've already done your preparation. The recruiter has guided you. So do your homework and go in with your best prep. And the chances are probably are there in the ballpark. No, trust me, they're looking at how you're trying to. So for example, even if it turns out to be a kind of a complicated data structures thing, just start with the basics.
Right.
Maybe you know how certain things happen. Sometimes they'll just, hey, what is the complexity of the algorithm? Does it run fast if the data size in? Just start first, try to address it in some way or the other. And maybe at times you just end up with this place, I don't know a bit. But don't just give up. I think giving up straight away is not a very good sign because ideally we are also looking to sure that the whole thing succeeds. So let's talk through a solution. Let's hear your assumption. Or maybe let's hear something similar that you've done. Sometimes it could be of that nature also. It may just not be a black and white question, right? Sometimes it could be like a general question that says, tell me about trade. That's it. This is the question. Now, is there a
So
right
your
or
voice
wrong?
cut out for me. I'm sorry. Can you come again? The
Okay.
last part.
Yeah, I'm saying maybe a general question that I can tell me about a time you tried to do some new feature and it failed.
Right.
There's no right or wrong answer. Like, I don't. I'm asking you. Yeah, and you can't say no. I don't think I failed. Okay, right? Maybe not, but you can then maybe to give an example. Then go as per your expectation. So be a
Right.
little bit humble also. Just try to explain, what you were doing and what you tried out and what you could have done better. Of course, everyone is a genius. Happen. All experts come out in the open. But that's okay. You
Right.
just analyze, do a post-mortem in a blameless way. Like, okay, this is what we learned. So there are various ways you can get to an answer. We just want to see how you're thinking, how you're approaching, what kind of help you're asking for, what kind of direction. I think that process is extremely important. Don't just stop there.
So like most of these big companies, the FANG companies, as our viewers wouldn't know about it maybe, a FANG company is one which falls into the FAANG companies. So F stands for Facebook. The first A stands for Amazon or Apple. The third A stands for Amazon or Apple. The N stands for Netflix and the G stands for Google. So these companies, they usually ask you comparative programming questions, assuming your role is for an engineer. And when that happens, they ask you these difficult programming questions and you have to come up with a solution within 30 or so minutes. So what happens is there are times you don't know about the answer to these questions. So what's suggested is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you don't know the answer to it, at least explain the way you'd go about it.
Yeah.
So that helps them find out about your thought process and what you think, and then it helps them assess you better. Instead of just say that, nahi aata karke, yeah, I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah, just start, make a start, give it some thought, and like you rightly said, right? The thought process. We want to see how you think. We want to see how you approach a problem because these things happen on an everyday basis. It need
Right.
not be a programming problem. It could just be another personal situation. It could be just the way sometimes you work with your peer. Be an organizational problem also. But we just want to see how you look at all the problems, how you, and most importantly, everything in life is a trade-off. You can't get everything. So when you say from a computing or a programming, say that, look, I kind of gave you the algorithm. I know it works, but this is the brute force. It doesn't work as efficiently as possible. But okay, you at least know first way of work. Now I will tell you, okay, let's try to improve it. What if I want to speed this up by 20%, 30%? Any thoughts around, right? So it's always a progressive solution. No one in any case. So no one is expecting you to create the greatest solution.
Right. So one question actually concerned with the comparative programming part of things. I heard somewhere and I read this somewhere that in Google interviews, you guys like the candidate is supposed to use Google Docs to program instead of something like a compiler.
The way we look at it is we're not expecting you to be, like by heart with syntax. No one knows syntax by heart. If they do, good for them, right?
Yeah.
But in any case, people use IDEs, code assist. It's not a shame at all. I can't remember, and I don't even worry at my what the second parameter of a circuit. It doesn't matter to you know what I'm doing. So if it's Google Docs, the way they're looking at it is show some pseudocode. And the reason is to sometimes it volume might just be quite nothing different. So in these situations, it's not about that you need to know that there were these standard functions by heart.
Right,
so the first or second parameter. No, in fact, when I give someone, when I gave the, sure, I had to do something in a Google Doc, but I kind of explained this is how like this that I. So they're just looking at how you are going about coding. I don't think that when you are actually putting down on a Google Doc or an ID, to me, it makes no difference whether you're using an ID or a Google Doc. When you're seeing something blank in front, and as a programmer, you're told, right? Forget an interview. They're just told, as an assignment, start coding. There is a certain thought process that starts. You start typing. Then you say, now I'll do this, now I'll do that. You're not going about it. It's not too much about the syntax. You know syntax, great, but that's not the object. I mean, we all know if it's a Google Docs, they're not telling you to compile this thing right in front of us. So it's all about, like, for example, if you're told to define a lot of things actually come out when, if I just tell you that, can you design me a function that takes an array of numbers and returns me what is the maximum out of it, right? I could just do a very simple problem. Right. But now you're staring at a blank space. So I'm just looking at the way you're looking at it. You know, that, okay, you're so basically I want you to talk. I'll return a Boolean. Fair enough. I don't care what the syntax is. Bool or Boolean, that's fine. Data type, that's okay. Then I'll say, what's the name of the function? Then
Right, right, right.
are you just using function one or are you saying max of something, right? So that gives another flavor to it, how you're going about, how you define your parameter.
Right.
That it comes out. If you're just beginning to learn a language at where you are in your third year, you won't care. You'll just say N1, N2, N3 or something of that sort.
Right.
But if you been through a few rounds, actual professional code developer team, you would have got a truckload of abuse for using names of that. Leave, no one understands what those. And as usual, you never put any comment. So you don't think of that picture. So I think it's all about seeing how you are approaching even a programming thing, like just defining a function in the code, what it looks like. And then as you start building out the body, a few things will come out very obvious. Are you checking whether the parameters are right? So the experience shows that.
Right, 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 right.
It's not about worrying whether it is Google Docs or will I get the right parameters. No one cares.
So it's a mix of both the programming practices and the code readability and also the logical thinking of the candidate.
Yeah, if ever you're in a situation of that sort, my advice is don't worry at all about the exact syntax. No one is looking at it.
Right, right, right.
And if they're looking at it, it's a sad situation.
Right. So one question I wanted to ask you, and this is the last question that I will be asking you, and then will be a section where we do the Q&A with us. What I wanted to ask you was, what one field you think is going to boom in the future? So currently, I feel this thing like AI/ML, which is seeing quite an influx of students. So our college has a course, an honors course in AI/ML. So it is seeing quite an influx of students. So what do you think might be the next thing which people might latch onto?
As I told you, I'm not an astrologer.
Right, but you might see, you might be accustomed to the market trends and stuff. So I guess.
Okay, so we're talking about market trends. I'll give you real market, and it depends on which camp you are in. So, for example, if I look at the cloud industry, which is what I'm familiar with, and if I just further filter down in the cloud industry, 80% of the money, or maybe more, actually, 80 to 90%, some of the money that people spend on the cloud are in pure virtual machines.
In pure, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Virtual machines. Just give me machines on the cloud to run my software. It could be pure storage, pure networking. AI and ML does not bring in the bugs, trust me, from a revenue perspective. However, that's not how you would want to also see. So I'm giving you both flavors, right?
Right.
So always remember that the thing that brings in is often the most stable, boring, and trusted technology. That always is the case, and it will continue to be the case. But that doesn't mean that everyone should be doing that only because that will happen. Tomorrow maybe something else will come up and AI/ML will become the boring part, or it's already part of everything that happens. But if you look at it, sure, AI/ML, everyone gets excited because of the way also it's projected, because of the kind of.
Right.
Also, it's more about just what everyone aspires, something new. So it's good, be inspired, do that. But I would say opportunities are right across. For example, even if you look at security, it's all over the place. Even if you look at cloud computing in general, right? Just help someone digitize things, move on to the cloud, huge opportunities, not going to go. AI and ML, trust me, if you are interested, it's good stuff. But let's be pragmatic, it requires things.
Right.
So you also have to get a little bit of things sorted out in terms of where the data is coming from, how you can process it, how you can store it, how you can do things at scale. And if you start doing that, sooner or later, someone asks, hey, how about security of this? Who do you take all this data as is? So you will find all of these. And how do you store it efficiently? How do you keep it in a way that even if one whole region goes down, it can still be served by another region, so on and so forth. So all elements come in. I don't think it's something in isolation that you have to do. But yeah, if you want to, look at certain segments only, all of these things represent opportunities. At times, it's also the way it's marketed. Again, it's not to say that it's pure marketing, so don't bother about it. Serious applications that can also come out from AI, ML, data analytics is another thing.
Right.
Or computing itself, right?
It also, I think, comes under the umbrella of data science, I think, which is picking up quite a bit.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I've heard is that even though it's seeing an influx of students, a lot of bachelor students are being drawn towards it. But the fact is that in the end, people who are considered employable by the industry are people who are postgraduates or PhDs who have more experience on the maths behind the entire process.
Depends on the kind of work. I don't think I don't. Yeah, even in AIML, I think it's not about the fact that one needs to be a mathematics or a statistics, and you hear all those kind of. So keep in mind there are two classes of users. Class of and another class of, by users I mean developer or engineering folks.
Right.
There'll be one who will build the stuff or a platform. For the other set of developers, so it depends where you are. If you are told, for example, to define the next TensorFlow or the next Python, then you need to have another kind of mindset, another kind of background, help create that. But if you are told, hey, you know what, just create a vision application for me that has a video feed and tells me what are the objects that you see. You don't need to go and figure out all the neural networks and whatever else there is and write it from scratch. You've got libraries that already. So it all depends where you're playing. Remember the gap of the number of people that we need to know these newer technologies and the number of graduates that are coming out with AIML. There is a huge gap that we never get to. So the opportunities are massive in any of this case. But if you look at it right, the way we are looking at it is an ability for someone to say, I can take in large amount, I can store it, I can filter it, I can transform it, I can analyze it, I can build models from it, I can visualize it. So it's a whole spectrum.
Right.
In a secure manner, in a scalable manner, many aspects. So when you look at whether it's AI, ML or anything that it goes up, so is it usable? It's usable. What are still the trade-offs? What are things you need to worry about more?
So one question which actually just, so that was supposed to be the last question, but what just struck me right now is you must have been around when Google Drive came about.
Where around in the sense?
At Google. So like.
No, I was not at Google when Google Drive got released.
Not exactly when it was released, but like when it was up and coming and when people were actually when it saw a large amount of users drawing in.
No, I was not there, but doesn't matter.
So my question was, what do you think? So like, what was the process like when you develop something like Google Drive? So Google Drive is something which is just magical if you think about it. It works on every device. You have Google Docs and Gmail and slides and everything. It just creates the perfect like just connection where if I'm typing and I'm working with someone right now, then there is no problem. There's no trouble, and he can type simultaneously. Even I can type, and there's nothing. There's like perfect concurrency, you could say. So, what's the process like when you're developing something like that?
I cannot answer this in a few months.
Right.
So yeah, if there are so many nuances to this.
Right.
It's a constant effort, but there are certain underlying things. Like if you're looking at like this is pure collaboration kind of a scenario where there's a single doc contention. How do you make sure they don't, step on each other's toes, despite their best efforts to do so? So there's a whole architecture to different technologies. It's not something that I can give an answer in a minute or two.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's what I can actually say in a minute or two. That It's like there are many things to it. Of course, the web, the cloud, and then there are some proprietary algorithms
Right,
behind
right,
the
right.
scenes that has made sure that if people are typing, how do we kind of figure that out? But if you get some time and if there's some things that interest you, just some of the other ways by which Google makes or there's different services, you can always go to the Google Cloud research keywords on the web, and it will lead you to the research page where they talk about how they're implementing certain things and also some newer things that they're.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Sounds good. So now this is the part where we answer some questions that were asked for the audience. So one question that I see is by Ravikant Jain. He asks, can you name some skills which can give a student edge over other applicants during the placement process?
So the point, if I could just answer that in a few lines, the way I would look at it is, let's assume that the skills that we are talking about, technical skills, those would be picked up. If you're told to prepare for something, you'll probably develop sites, what all, you'll probably sleep less, but you'll figure that out, right? In some
Right, right,
kind of
right.
way. It's a repetitive process. Sometimes you get the concept, sometimes it takes you a few days, but you'll get there. But what will really stand out over there is how you are approaching a problem, like some of the points which I made. How do you approach it? How do you go slowly? How do you don't jump to an answer? How do you list down your assumptions? How do you state and things of that nature. Even for example, like you already sort of internalized how you feel, right? Things of that nature. So I think it's all about your frame of mind, how you're looking at an interview.
Right, sir.
And what we're looking for is really the person. The other things, trust me, you'll figure it out.
Definitely.
There's a whole life for it.
So there's one question which is asked anonymously. The question says, after how much of hard work, and you can refuse to answer this if you want, after how much of hard work and effort a casual candidate has to put in order to get faster promotions and maybe
Faster
become a CEO in
promotion.
the future?
I don't think there's I try to give my viewpoints, but I don't think there is anything quantitative here in terms how much of work and where you start from and become a CEO. I think it's all going to depend upon what your interests and drivings, what your ambitions are, and are you clear on the path? And remember, you will not get there alone. So if
Right.
you're working of course, you found your own firm, call your for all you care. But in case you're looking at an already, then obviously remember at the CEO level, it's not that you're.
So your voice is cutting out actually, sir.
Am I audible now? Better?
Yeah. You were saying
Yeah.
at a CEO level and then you just cut
Yeah,
out.
at a CEO level, it's not just about sitting and doing some coding or something other, right? It's multiple functions of an organization, how they work. You need to know a little bit of finances, engineering. You need to know how to delegate. So many skills. I can't be someone who probably said this is the bouquet of skills you have to pick up. It's going to take you
Right,
1
right, right.
hour, 1 year, or 10 years to do it. But to have that right, you have to talk to folks who've done it. You have to also play the organizational game in order to move forward. There are certain dynamics that any organization has, certain games that people play that social aspect and other aspects too. So there's a combination of everything. But if you have the drive, you need to figure out the path, work with people, take their help, work with them. Um, it's a game. Let's put it
Right.
that way.
Right.
It depends on what your interests are. For example, I have no aspirations to do anything about it. I have no aspirations to manage a lot of people. It's perfectly fine. I focus on the other. It's all about trade-offs. You have to balance a few things there.
Right. So one more question is, and I think I'll answer it. You can answer it if you want. The question is, who gets preference when it comes to placement, CS students or IT students?
it's too general a question.
Right.
I mean, the way I don't know what exactly you would refer to an IT student or CS student.
Exactly.
So I'm a bit confused there.
Right. So I'll answer it instead. So what happens is in our college, we have two different streams. It's computer science and IT. Now CS has more specializations in artificial intelligence, and they have data science and they have cybersecurity being taught. But generally speaking, there is not much of a distinction between CS and IT students from the companies. So there's that. So there's not much of a distinction. It's to them, it's the same thing, because if you go to a multinational company, they do not know the very minute differences between something like a CS or an IT, like, because there are barely any differences. So the department is different. So we have different professors, but in the end, you're taught the same concepts. So in the end of when it comes to employability, it's the same thing.
Yeah. So earlier, my reference to just having the right skills, because when you're just graduating, there's only that much that companies can evaluate you on. So if I just get back to what I was saying earlier, and that's my strong recommendation, tell me why I should hire. And if you can tell me that by saying, look at my list of work that I've done, look at the kind of code I already have on, look at the kind of stuff that I'm doing on at the community level, look at the talks I've given at my college or at events. Show that to me. Show me your social resume. Don't show me something that is just a bunch of English paragraphs.
Right. Okay. So one question, last one, this will be the last question we'll be answering. The question is how to get a dream offer through MBA degree in Google.
My standard answer would be that let's keep the words dream, offer, and other things aside. Usually, like even if I talk about the number of times I get requests at LinkedIn that can you forward my resume for a particular job, things of that nature. I keep it very simple. I just say that, look, go to our careers page. There are tons of jobs already on offer. If you think you're a fit for it, go for it and work it out. I'm not sure. I mean, what's a dream offer? I mean, dream offer obviously something that you aspire for. You have got some benchmarks, but I mean, there are positions open everywhere, not just Google or any, just not. I mean, for example, only Google. So, I mean, if something interests you, I think my advice is don't worry about the brand. There is all kinds of works. It's something that you need to be interested in. And if you can just keep at it by demonstrating why you are a good candidate or a good hire, the job which will come to you. You don't need to go into this.
Right. So one question, which is, can we get hired abroad with an MBA Tech integrated degree?
I can't say about MBA Tech or anything, but I can just say is that if there are positions that are outside of, let's say, India, then we do support them. So if there's a clear requirement that is met, and if the recruiter does communicate that they're willing to maybe do a relocation or sponsor for the visa, it's not just Google. Most companies will do. If they find that the fit is good, they will be more than happy to see if they can get some of the other, I would say, processes in place, whether it's relocation or visa or other things. I mean, good candidates are an asset to any company, and they will go the extra mile in most situations, unless situations demand that they can't do. Or you need to already have a work permit. Some companies may say that, but some companies may be willing to even go forward and help you with that. So there's nothing restrictive that if you are in X or Y country and the positions are elsewhere, if you meet the working, I would say whatever be the rule of work permit, and obviously you need to clear the rest of the interview. That might be the harder, not the visa and others.
Yeah. So that's the end of the interview, and thus we conclude the first edition of Tech Tippani. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on, and thank you for taking the time to come on, and We'll be coming up with some new content every single month. And thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good evening, everyone.